Listen, I'm going to throw myself under the bus. You're awesome, hence Super Rad Steve.
Right.
But I do tell myself stories about, the stories I tell myself aren't about you being a bad husband or anything.
I'm not.
Because you're an awesome husband. And he's human, so he does stupid things just like I do stupid things. Like we all do stupid things. Welcome to being a human. But I tell myself stories about your business. And this is one reason why I try to stay out of your business, because the stories I tell myself, I just jump in and start taking over. Welcome back, or welcome to the Conscious Investor Podcast, the show where we talk about health, mindset, and wealth building strategies. I'm your host, Julie Holly, and it is a Monday. It's a very special Monday, back by popular demand. So many of you have said having Super Rad Steve on the show those are some of your favorite episodes, and there really aren't enough of those episodes. And really, we're going to get into why there aren't more of those episodes. In fact, you've heard me talk on the podcast about how, I think, and Super Rad Steve agrees, we should just record our conversations because we think that they're actually interesting. And that's not our ego coming out. We just think that we have really interesting conversations that a lot of couples likely aren't engaging in or struggle to engage with. And so this morning, as we were having coffee and pie, which is a tradition after any holiday to honor, just remember my dad. And that is, we were sitting there and Super Rad Steve shows me a couple of reels on relationships. And it triggered a conversation. And I literally said, hey, you know what? We should just go and hit record and put this out there for the conscious investor. The topic that we decided that we landed on is the stories we tell ourselves and how they affect our marriage. And as we were talking about this in advance, I was telling him, I said, wow, this is so in line with Crucial Conversations, like that concept that he was presenting, what he gained from the reels. And as we were going through this, it was really fascinating. I'm going to stop talking because we're going to dive into this conversation together. And you know what? Back by popular demand, I listen to you, Conscious Investor. We have Super Rad Steve in the house. Welcome back.
Hey.
Super Rad Steve.
Thanks for having me back, dear.
I know. I feel like you and I are always together because we pretty much are. And then, but Conscious Investor doesn't get to hang out with us all the time.
No, what usually happens is we're in the house having a conversation about whatever, and you say we should be recording this, or hey, let's go record and talk about this, and it just never happens. So somehow you got me out here this morning.
I did. I think, that persistence and your persistence in letting me know, Conscious Investor, that you love these episodes, all of that has been very supportive. Remember, I say, those ratings and reviews and the feedback you provide help me get great guests. And this really, truly helped me get Super Rad Steve back on the show. So let's just talk about I
had to work you through my long waiting list of, appearances here.
That's true. That's true. So yeah, you and I had different perceptions. You showed me a few different reels from the socials that you had saved on relationships, and we might need to record a few episodes. We're not going to get into one of them because it literally, he's like, well, that triggered you. And I'm like, heck yeah, I did.
It got a little spicy.
A little spicy. So hopefully I can, encourage Steve enough to come back and we'll record on that one. But let's talk about this whole stories affecting marriage, because recently you literally called me out on this. I forgot where we were, maybe driving down to Boise to my mom's for a birthday.
What it was. Well, but it was something. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't like being, well, as you would always often say, don't put me in a box. Don't put me in a box. It's like, well, okay, well, I guess I don't like that either. I guess I wish I could remember what the actual conversation was. I guess it happens enough that just sort of came in and like a little conversation fairy flew in the car and then flew right back out.
What's interesting though? actually, this is like a little tangent here, and I hesitate to go down a tangent with you and I, but it'll may be interesting. Is that you're recently, this is like a recent thing where you're actually calling me out, and I'm loving it. Believe it or not, I'm absolutely loving it because as a highly motivated or high performer, some of you don't want to call yourself a high performer, but you're highly motivated. Um, so as that person, I love that type of feedback. So I would just love to know what's shifting within you that is allowing you to call me out on
Well,
like
it's
as a story.
well, I guess I'd want to clarify. Like, it's not a call out. Like, I think when some people think of like being called out, it's like in front of everybody, like shining a spotlight on your flaw, and that's not what it is.
Like you in
That's
sixth grade with that teacher.
yeah, yeah. There's some drama, but it comes down to just pointing out the things like, hey, you're not being accurate, or you're being more. I don't mean you specifically, but people in general, they're not being really accurate, or they're being more emotionally driven in what they're saying rather than true and accurate to whatever is happening in the moment. Right? Like I think sometimes our head and our thoughts get in the way. And so as we are having conversation, like with that reel this morning that like got you all bothered. Like there was nothing wrong with what this guy was saying, but it just didn't sit right with you. So it's like, well, cool your jets, hold on, like, and hear what this guy is saying. Just because you don't like what he's saying doesn't make it not true, right? I mean, that's okay. I guess we need to have some context here. So this reel on one of the socials, he's
Well,
explaining.
we're not getting into that one.
Oh, that's
No,
not the one you want to talk about.
No, we said we'll save that one. That one's pretty spicy. We got to stick to stories affecting, that we're telling ourselves. Um, and I did take you on a tangent and I want to circle back to that because you and I have engaged in a lot of personal growth over the last 5-6 years. And our trajectories have been a little bit different. And you've become far more engaged in your own internal development over the last few years. So when you call me out, that to me like is massive growth for you because you would never call me out before. And for me as a high performer, that created this subtle tension because I was like, I want to be called out. I don't want to get away with stuff if I'm doing something that's hurtful or going to erode things. Like I don't want to. I'm using air quotes. If you're listening, if you're on YouTube, you get to see the whole show, right? But I'm kind of like I don't want to get away with it. So what shifted in you, particularly over the last year? Is it a snowball effect of all your development? Is it like you're actually calling me out in a healthy way, not in a shameful, disparaging, you're a horrible person. Like it's in a really respectful, awesome way. And I love it.
Oh, it's just a matter of being. I mean, before I can answer that, I guess I have to back up and explain my whole philosophy of being agreeable.
Hey,
Okay.
she tells me to be agreeable all the time.
I've been saying that for years because you historically are, and it's not that you're being disagreeable, but you have a very strong way of sort of counterpointing somebody's, point they're making, which is good. And I think it's healthy for conversation, but a lot of folks aren't really at a place where they can, I guess, receive that. So for a lot of years, it was, especially in like casual conversation. Like it's one thing if you're sitting there having like a deep dive into something specific, but in casual conversation, oh, hey, Jimmy, bump into you at the coffee shop. It's like just be agreeable. There's no point in creating sort of like, well, what about this? What about that? So I think it kind of comes from like I have a tendency to be agreeable, probably too much so. So I guess it's sort of like taking my own advice, but in reverse. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. But okay, so you're right. And we were raised in really different environments, like that whole nature nurture, like the nurture part of our environments, like um, debate. And we just came off of a trip, right, where we hung out with my family
Yeah, it was
and
good.
we just hang out and talk. So there are like the level of word use in my home, and then having a large family created this dynamic, and then a very articulate family for generations where you people are debating all the time. So like for me, that's the sandbox, that's fun, that's norm. And so I find it not disagreeable, but for someone that was raised you were raised as an only child for 9 years,
Yeah.
I can see how that could be overwhelming.
Well, I think the listeners need to understand, like, you were the youngest of four, and you're all spaced out by 2 years. So you're all kind of in the same, except at the early ages, you're all kind of in the same sort of spot. I mean, generally speaking. And a kind of a professional household. Grandparents were of the professional nature, and which I think just generally speaking lends itself to conversations. And so that's what you grew up with. Now, on the flip side, I grew up, my mom was an only child. My dad was not an only child, but his next oldest sibling was a decade older than him. So he was kind of an only child. And then I was an only child till I was 9. So there was not that anything resembling that same dynamic. So conversations at my house growing up really didn't occur. My dad was not one to have, deep introspective thoughts. And if he was, he certainly didn't share them with the family. So he kind of fell into the, get up in the morning, work, come home, eat dinner, sit in the chair, go to bed, repeat. So yeah, it was a very, very different situation
It,
altogether.
yeah, so then going back to the concept of be agreeable is it's really interesting because uh sometimes I am just straight up disagreeable. Sometimes right? I mean, that's human nature, and I'm not gonna, like, shy away from that at all, but sometimes we can be misunderstood, so going back to the stories that we tell ourselves, wait, I wanna wow, we're really in a really nice web together right now, um, because we have to we've got to wrap up.
Stay tuned. It'll
Yeah,
change.
it's coming, guys. And welcome to Super Rad Steve and Julie conversation, because this is how our conversations go. We go down into these little rabbit holes. But you were saying that you're being agreeable actually has some origins to it, and we needed to explain what being agreeable meant. It's like going into some family situations. He would remind me in a loving way. You weren't ever rude about it. You would remind me, on the way there, something like, "Hey, just be agreeable." It's just
Yeah. But that also kind of sounds like I was coming at it from a let's avoid confrontation and let's be, all happy, smiley. And I don't think it was coming from that. It was coming from more of a for the sake of the group, like, hey, let's have let's I don't know. It's kind of like bringing up politics, in a mixed family. It's like you don't want to do that.
I don't think that avoiding conflict though is bad
No.
necessarily. Like there are certain relationships where I just feel like diminishing returns.
Sometimes
There's
you
no
need
point.
sometimes you need conflict to resolve something. Like if everybody's just smiling and getting along, there's probably not a whole lot of, you know, production productivity happening because everybody's just sort of going the same direction.
Yeah. Well, and like if I'm not particularly close to somebody, and it's not a relationship that I'm deeply vested in, and I know that that relationship isn't one where either of us are like going to really be like going super deep together, I am far more agreeable. So it's just FYI, conscious investor, when we see each other at the growth summit, if I might seem less agreeable, that's a sign of care. Care. from me to say, I think that this is a valuable person in my life.
Yeah.
Because I think I can rock the boat or I can say something. And then the story that that person is going to say in their head isn't going to be a story that's negative.
Yeah. I mean, you should not always be agreeable. Nobody should. But at the same time, sometimes a lot of these arguments and confrontations and blow ups happen because people are intentionally not being agreeable.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. People just like basically what
Like,
our son like
name it. Like anything. People want to argue about anything.
our guy.
No, they don't. Yes, they do.
What?
Yeah.
No.
No, you're clearly wrong.
People aren't like,
Here's the evidence. But here's the evidence to the contrary over here.
and we're coming off of Thanksgiving, so some of you, this might be like super real to you because maybe you experienced something, over that holiday week. I'm not sure.
And the button pusher in me wants to like show up
Man,
to like a big gathering intentionally sporting like a political t-shirt of the opposite of what the majority of the people are, would agree to, just because I think that would create some amazing something. It probably wouldn't. But in my head, it would be like this really cool, funny social experiment.
you always say that there's a teenager. It ranges from 13 to 16 inside of you, and that is like such a teenage sentiment right there.
Yeah.
That's funny. So, I mean, even in this conversation, I can see the stories that we tell ourselves and each other. And so let me just back that up a little bit. And I should have done this earlier, conscious investor, so I apologize. But in crucial conversations, I highly recommend this book. There's a flow. And you've probably heard me talk about the flow before, but it's a flow chart with 4 cells to it, right? And the first one says, like, hey, something happens. And then a millisecond or less later, we create a story around what took place. And then we generate feelings. The third segment is the feelings that we generate based off of that story. And then we act on that. So our actions don't even happen for quite a bit. Like there's distance from what took place and how we're acting. And it's all based upon the story we're telling ourselves. And listen, I'm going to throw myself under the bus. You're awesome, hence Super Rad Steve.
Right.
But I do tell myself stories about, the stories I tell myself aren't about you being a bad husband or anything.
I'm not.
Because you're an awesome husband. And he's human, so he does stupid things just like I do stupid things. Like we all do stupid things. Welcome to being a human. But I tell myself stories about your business. And this is one reason why I try to stay out of your business, because the stories I tell myself, I just jump in and start taking over.
Yeah, that definitely happens. Yeah, maybe that's what it was the other day. You're
I think so.
jumping in on something. It's like, okay, we don't do things the same way. And that's okay. Like, is there one way that's inherently better than another? I don't know. In most circumstances, I don't think so. I mean, obviously there are some, but when you're talking about this thing called life, I don't think there's one thing that's better than another in most circumstances. How's that for being on the fence?
Yeah, that was definitely
the political answer.
Are you running? Are you running for office in 4 years or something?
Maybe I should.
You want to come out right now and just say, okay. But it's interesting because I think everybody is telling themselves stories, and we need to be mindful of the stories that we're curating in our head, particularly when we're talking about our marriages, where we want to have a strong marriage. If I'm telling myself the story that, you should be doing X, Y, Z with your business. And you actually told me, you said, hey, you're not going to like this. And it was good. It was good feedback. And so you're wondering what he said.
I wish I could remember what it was.
I know what you said. We were driving down a particular road coming back from Saturday morning coffee time, which is something we try. It's like space we try to hold for each other to just go hang out.
This would be a surprise for everybody, including me right now.
No, you're going to remember it right away because you said this. You're not going to like this, but you don't know everything, and you think you know all these things, and you.
That's why my lip is split right here.
Listener, you have to go over to YouTube for evidence that that's not accurate.
No split lips.
But it was a really good. It led to a good conversation, but we were both telling ourselves very different stories, and it created tension. I wouldn't say like a full like. I think you and I experienced more tension versus arguments.
Well, stop arguing with me or disagreeing with me.
I know. I'm trying to be agreeable.
Right.
No, but that's an interesting thing. Like, do you think that's a fair assessment that it's like we don't really have arguments so much as tension based off of different views, different stories?
I mean, there's definitely tensions there. And I mean, really, what do we talk about that doesn't create some tension? Like, we're not usually being like in a parade together, rah, going for the same thing. We're usually talking about, I don't know, it's more philosophical stuff where there isn't like a clear right or wrong answer. Like, I don't know. You're better at analogies than I am. But
I'll be agreeable with that.
Yeah, of course. Of course, when it serves our purposes. Yeah.
Well, okay, so what do we think? What do you think, like the conscious investor should understand about the stories that they're telling themselves that are affecting the relationships in their lives?
Man, that's a pretty hefty question right there. I mean, if you are making assumptions about somebody else, like that's not good. I mean, we all do it. I mean, like you're never going to, get to a point where it's like, oh, well, I no longer make assumptions about other people. But be aware of the assumptions you're making and kind of build off of that. It's like guys tend to do this far less, if at all, of the I feel statements. It's more of a, like, the way we're feeling, we tend to speak it out as like, this is the way it is, like, blah, 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 this is it. When it really is more of a I feel or I think statement. So be aware of those, because those are good, but make sure you're not projecting the way you're feeling or thinking on whatever the topic is onto someone else.
So I think that when you were talking about that, I reached back to the treasure trove of books I just love being surrounded by. But like when we're talking about the whole assumptions, I'm holding it up right now. Everyone should be reading the 4 Agreements.
I need to read it again. It's been a while.
And this came up recently in our conversations about, it says literally one of the agreements, the 3rd agreement is don't make assumptions. And
we all do.
We do. And so like when we tell ourselves these stories, and for example, I could tell myself the story, you sent me a funny reel. This sounds like he sends me and we engage on socials.
I spend at least 8 hours on social media.
I don't care if you do. Like, that's...
Well, I would care if I did. That'd be ridiculous.
If that was your job, then maybe that wouldn't be a bad thing. But what I'm trying to say is it's funny we're talking about a lot of these things because like there were 4 reels. And one you sent to me, and so for those of you married, like you definitely know it's one of those where the husband's there and it's like how to have a happy marriage, and he sends me this reel and I didn't even have to watch the reel.
She knew exactly what it was. Yes, I'm that predictable.
Little Miss didn't even have to like watch the reel or anything. Like she's sitting with me in the kitchen and she's like, you asked like, oh, did you get that reel? I'm like, it probably has to do with boobs and like marriage boobs. Like I get this. And he's like, whoa, you got it. So then I tell myself the story, right? I could tell myself a few stories. I could be like, the one story I could say is, oh my gosh, we have humor in our marriage and this is fun. And we have a safe marriage, platform where we can just like laugh and throw silly things our way. And I could have fun. And that's in my opinion, that would be a positive story. Or I could have a negative story to myself. And I could actually tell myself like, oh my gosh, this is just his passive aggressive way of telling me that he wants to see more boobs and he wants more bedtime and things like that. Like I could tell me which, and you can hear like, those are all great things, right? But I could say that in a negative way to myself so that it now creates a story that the feelings that are going to come from that are very, very different. One is light and laughter, and maybe I do want to flash you or something and just be funny. And then the other story that I would tell myself where I'm like, oh, he's being passive aggressive. I might not want you to touch me. I might be like aloof. I might be frustrated and short with you. Those are the actions that are going to come from the feelings, right? So it's really interesting.
I think I need to add some clarification here for the listeners, like, because there's no context given. This was because we've all probably seen lots of questionable things coming up on these various short format, videos and whatnot. So this, in my feed, there's typically stuff on like personal development, marriage improvement, that sort of thing. So this was one of those like, and it was obviously done in comedic form and tastefully
It was very tasteful. You watch it from Little Miss watched it with me. It wasn't like
nothing
crude and rude, and it wasn't vulgar.
Yeah, but it was something like how to make your husband's day or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it was
fun.
something that was innocent enough to show our daughter.
What?
But I guess some people are like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Well, you're wrong. You're wrong.
You're gonna disagree now?
I think you guys are clearly wrong.
Oh, so I mean, but we can see even right now you're telling yourself a story. This is real-time storytelling, right? You're telling yourself a story that you even need to make a clarification to the conscious investor about the content, about the safety of the content, about your feed. So like walk us through what's that story that flashed through your head that led you to a belief that you needed to actually clarify.
Well, that's the thing, is the things that flash through our head, as you put it, I don't think we're usually like consciously aware of it. It's like these little things that just sort of flit through our mind and create a insecurity or whatever insert feeling here, sense. But since there's no context of the video that you're referencing, I figured it would probably make sense so that it's not like this ridiculous thing that we're showing our daughter as well. Insert my own insecurity there, I guess. But it's, I want to be above reproach. Is that the right word?
Yeah, no, that's good. It's but you can see. I hope you're enjoying this, conscious investor. We're going to wrap it up here, but I just want like that is real time. An extension of this whole concept of stories, which again, this is just like indicative of our conversations and how they go down rabbit holes and create, spider webs. But what would happen if we didn't act on the first story that we tell ourselves? If we paused, if we did raise our level of consciousness, of awareness, if we paused and actually framed the story or reframed it and just looked at the story before allowing the feelings to erupt and flourish and grow, leading to actions that we may, end up regretting. So Michael Singer talks about this in Living Untethered and Untethered Soul. He talks about how feelings and emotions, and I know you've read both of those. Like
that was like the turning point for me, was his like the picture he drew in that.
Oh, well, okay. Like I'll let you.
Are you talking about like looking at what you're thinking or feeling like up on a screen?
Yeah, like
yeah.
Go for it.
He was saying like, think about all the thoughts that you have throughout your day, throughout your life, and you are in the middle of those thoughts. The perspective he gave was, think of yourself in a movie theater, and the movie you're watching is up there on the screen. You're no longer in your head. You're looking at what's on that screen. And so your sense of self-awareness tends to go away because you're focused on something outside of you. So what he was trying to describe was try stepping back, like put what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your thoughts are up on that screen so that you can observe yourself observing those thoughts and feelings. Right?
Yeah.
So it was almost like watching yourself watching a movie, like your facial expressions and your reactions and the popcorn flying. But to do that with your own thoughts, he explains it much better in the book. So, but yeah, that was like a huge eye opener for me, of just like an awareness of what you're thinking and the stuff that's going through your mind.
Okay, so it was a big shift for you. So what would you say you shifted from and shifted into?
Being in the middle of my thoughts and not fully being aware of them, I think would be which I think is where most people are, unfortunately. And I'm still guilty of it. We all are, but it's just about creating an awareness about what is going through your mind. What your thoughts and feelings are. I mean, it's, I forget where in the Bible, but it's like, take every thought captive and, kind of question it. And not all thoughts are good thoughts, so push them away. Accept the good ones, accept the ones that are, benefiting you, helping you, and get rid of the ones that are holding you back.
That's interesting. I always think about that whole, a lot of times there seems to be so much like tension between like the biblical Christian faith and like say Michael Singer's work and such. And I'm not saying that they're totally aligned. There are things where I don't agree with all of Singer's work, but it's especially on the thought life, the thought process. I feel like that whole how he presents that really takes the I'm kind of into the word je ne sais quoi. It just takes that quality out of it and puts it into like a tangible form. And instead of like, oh, just take those thoughts captive and you make them obedient to God. Like it actually is like, oh, this is how I can see my thoughts. This is how I can interact with my thoughts, and this is how I can determine and understand if this thought is healthy and helpful for me and I should keep it, or if I should discard it because it's going to, take me the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I stopped reading the book like not long after that because it was so, that was the thing I needed to get out of that book at that time. And I will eventually go back and.
Oh, you didn't finish it?
No, like I was blown away by that. I'm like, I don't know if my brain can absorb anything new.
That
was what I needed.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yep.
so just like taking one item kind of, taking that from 2 years ago has really shifted your ability to look at the stories you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll elevate to your level at some point because the stories can still get out of hand, and I have to be so mindful of it. My mind is going so fast all the time, and we can see even in this conversation, like our conversations really cover a menagerie, and my mind is very much like that, and so it creates a really interesting.
We need to create like our own household Truman Show type experience.
I think that's called reality TV, and I don't think that we want. Yeah, that's not reality. So, is there anything else you want to add on this?
I mean, when you get me going, I feel like I could stay going for a while.
I know you and I are both talkers, especially once you get warmed up, you're ready.
Yeah. What is it? I'm like an old car. It takes a while to warm up, but once it's going and going.
All right. Well, Conscious Investor, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for coming back onto the show. I would like to have you back to talk about that reel that triggered me. I'd like to record that sometime soon while it's fresh in our minds because
I'll play it for you again here a little while before, just to see you get triggered all over again. Is that triggering?
I'm feeling triggered and I don't have a kitty around me, so no, we're joking around here. Yeah, so I think that'd be really interesting. Let us know how you like this podcast episode. Let me know if you want to see more of Super Rad Steve on the show. I know I'm going to get him back for one more episode sooner than later, because I know you're curious about what triggered me and why. And I think that the conversation that comes from that is actually a really relevant conversation in context to culture right now. And I think that'll be interesting. It might be triggering to you, conscious investor, in so many different ways. But maybe we'll just go there. Let us know what you think of this podcast episode. You can leave a rating, review. Make sure you subscribe, follow, all of that, because that really does make a big difference for the show. Do you have anything else you want to just like?
Yeah, I do.
Cool.
I know.
Good job.
Shocker.
This is great.
I would like to know what other people would like to hear for topics of conversation.
Ooh.
Is there something specific? Like, we're not experts on most things, or really anything. I'm not an expert on anything, but
We have thoughts on things.
I have lots of thoughts.
We have lots of thoughts.
I have lots of controversial opinions. So if there's some sort of topic that we should talk about, I would be curious to know what it is.
That's interesting that you say that you have controversial opinions. Like, that just shows, like, is there internal conflict? Like, what makes them but that's a whole nother. Do you see that this is where we go if we were having cocktails on the deck on the summer night? This would be a cocktail conversation that would go on into the sunset hours at 10 o'clock in North Idaho. So, conscious investor, come hang out with me, Super Rad Steve, and other conscious investors at the Conscious Investor Growth Summit. Pick up your tickets. It's really helpful for the event to be able to plan and know who's coming. And honestly, I just get super stoked when I see this ticket selling and I see who's coming. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so rad. So if you haven't already picked up a ticket, head over to consciousinvestorgrowthsummit.com. Pick up your ticket. The event takes place March 6th through 9th. The 6th is a welcome reception. We know what it's like to travel to North Idaho, so we just wanted to be hospitable and make you, like, wrap your day of travels in a really comfortable, fun way. And remember, it's an experience. I mean, we've got the cold plunge, hiking for VIPers, lunch boat cruise for VIPers. We've got some off-site experiences taking place for everybody. I didn't want it to just be VIP only for everything, but VIP really allows you to have, like, just intimate, close proximity to all the speakers, all the sponsors, and other people who are really, truly, like, deeply committed just in their journey of life and evolution. So we'll be covering health, mindset, and wealth building strategies. So this isn't just a real estate investing conference at all. This is not like, hey, I'm going to go and we're going to crack down and teach you how to syndicate. Like, those are mechanics, and those are hard skills. They're important. But this event is soft skills. This is the intangible that is the difference between people who are successful and people who aren't. And the feedback from last year's event was overwhelming. Like, everybody was just shocked at, I didn't even realize how much I needed that. I came for this part of the investing strategy, and actually what I really needed, and I didn't know, was this over here. So please make sure you pick up your tickets. All right, conscious investor, you are appreciated. Until next time, live fully into your freedom.